We're back with our national security analyst, Susan Hennessey. Susan, you're the narrator of a new podcast explaining the Mueller report in very understandable ways. I want to ask you about that, but let's listen to this brief excerpt.
Reading the report is hard. It's long, it's dense factually, and covers an immense amount of ground. It's got a lot of law. Blocks of black redactions make portions nearly unreadable. It's one of the most important and consequential documents of our time, but a lot of people aren't reading it. Members of Congress aren't reading it. Members of the press aren't really reading it. You can forgive the average citizen if they aren't reading it either. This podcast tells the story that Mueller does, but in a format that's a little more manageable. Buried under the legalese is a hell of a story. Part gripping spy thriller, part tale of White House intrigue, part alarm bell for anyone who cares about democracy around the world.
Oh, that sounds very, very impressive. But for everyone who hasn't necessarily read all 448 pages and the footnotes of the Mueller report, what storylines are you highlighting?
Yeah, so we are just sticking to the story that Robert Mueller actually tells, the story of what the Russian social media manipulation operation looked like, what the hacking operation looked like, and also what the report says about what the Trump campaign and his associates knew about those operations at the time, what they did, their efforts to actually sort of go out and obtain a set of hacked emails that it turns out may not have existed. And so it's not really diving into the questions of whether or not you want to call it collusion or sort of those legal conclusions. It's just the facts so that the American public can listen to this story in sort of a compelling, digestible format and decide for themselves what it means.
So what are you doing to make the Mueller report more readable, more digestible?
So essentially we're just telling the story, and it's a little bit like listening to a true crime podcast. You know, we're just going through what happened. We're having journalists who told the story, who covered it in real time, including some of the journalists who actually broke the biggest stories of the Mueller investigation on CNN on this very show. Coming in, giving the listener sort of context, telling them the story of what happened. There's no hot takes, there's no political commentary, really just sticking to, really this remarkable, fascinating, and really, really consequential story that Robert Mueller has laid out for the American public.
Yeah, so you clearly want to give the public, give the Mueller report more exposure to the American public and to detail some of the specific charges that were included there, including obstruction.
Yeah, so we think that the Mueller report is one of the most consequential documents of our time. It is incredibly important, regardless of what political party you might be a part of. Just understanding what the Russians did, understanding what happened on the American side. And we hear a lot that sort of the American public, they've seen the Mueller report, they don't care, they don't support impeachment, everyone wants to move on. We have seen an overwhelming response to this podcast. It went #1 to the charts, really with almost no publicity, and we think that this really demonstrates the proposition that, look, people care about this report, they still care about this report, but they need help in understanding and breaking down what it means.
Thank you for what you're doing. Very, very important work. And to our viewers, you can find the first 3 episodes of the podcast called The Report at lawfareblog.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Susan.